Hey, what up, YouTube? First video in a little while. Not really much going on. College sports is college sports. I know we're still waiting for an announcement from the Pacific Athletic Conference. So I guess, most of the time I talk about things in the scope of football, college football, for the most part. So I guess just an update on that end of things. It seems like we're kind of waiting for the Pacific Athletic Conference to make their announcement, I guess you would say, on who their next member will be, their media rights deal, and all that stuff. So everything's just kind of going real slow right now, right? We probably won't hear anything from the Mountain West at all either, because technically, as of right now, I mean, they have their membership for football and for basketball. So, I mean, they have 9 for football. I want to say they have, how many for basketball? Because they have UC Davis and Grand Canyon, and IU's not participating in basketball or any other sport, just football. I feel like I'm missing something. I want to say UTEP is a full member. So I want to say they have 10 for basketball, if I'm doing the math right. If I'm doing that math correctly, because I don't think there's any other members that aren't full members, like other than UC Davis, which I guess technically is a full member other than football. Grand Canyon, I believe, is a full member other than football. NIU, or football only member. UTEP, I believe, is going to be a full member. So yeah, if I'm doing the math correct, then yeah, 10 for basketball, 9 for football. So yeah, the Mountain West is good. It's the PAC. The PAC has been the conference that's kind of been in a situation because they've only been sitting at 7 for football for a while now. Like, they've been just sitting at 7. It's 2025 already, right? We're slowly but surely, we're going to look up, and it's going to be the end of June, and we can say that we've gone through half a year come the end of June. And if we get to half a year, half of 2025, and you still don't have at least member number 8, I'm talking about in terms of football, if you still don't have member number 8 for football, I'd be worried a bit. We do know that they have 8 members total overall, but only 7 for football because the 8th member is Gonzaga, which I believe is a full sports participant other than football because they don't have a football program, not that I know of. So yeah, just a quick reminder, for the most part, everybody is speculating, everything is leaning towards the next member being Texas State. I want to say, I've heard somebody say, well, the reason why it hasn't been announced or this, that, third is for the house settlement stuff. They'll announce stuff after that. But we got to keep in mind, at one point, San Diego State's athletic director literally said end of March. It is now the end of March, and we have not gotten anything. So who knows what's really going on with the Pacific Athletic Conference. But I do think that house settlement, that probably is the reason why things are on a slight pause, a slight slowdown, because people do want to see how that's going to impact everything. And if you've heard A.D. Frazier mention, right, when he was talking about our transition to the Mountain West and also Horizon League, you heard him mention, the house settlement, NIL, the transfer portal, finances in general, competitive, just being in a more competitive situation. Like, when you look at it at the end of the day, right, the argument is this: is moving to the Mountain West a step up from the MAC? In a sense, yes. Right, it is still a step up from the MAC, because the only reason I'm asking that, or the only reason somebody would ask that, is, well, is it a step up from the MAC based on the current Mountain West, right, this rebuilt Mountain West? if it was the Mountain West still with San Diego State, Fresno State, Utah State, Colorado State, and Boise State, that's a no-brainer. Nobody would be sitting there asking, is that conference a step up? It's hands down a step up. But because you are losing, I guess, what people would consider the top 5 of the conference, right? And now you literally are sitting in a conference, like, you're now sitting in a conference where every team that's left has never won the conference in football. Air Force hasn't won a conference championship in football. UNLV has not won a conference. Any of the teams that are left, none of them have won a conference championship in football. The 5 that are leaving have at least won 1, maybe 2 conference championships in football. So it does look away, right? We know that I want to say for the most part, I think Boise State has won the most the most Mountain West Conference championships. I might be wrong. You can fact check me on that one. But Boise State, hands down, is the most recognized team in that conference, or coming from that conference now. So you've heard me say it before. Even in this new Pacific Athletic Conference, Boise State is still going to be king of the hill. And hands down, they're going to be better than Washington State. They're going to be better than Oregon State. Boise State is still your best team. So for the PAC, getting Boise State was the priority. Everybody else, I mean, yeah, there's benefits to adding San Diego State. There's benefits to adding Fresno State. The way I would rank it, power rankings-wise of additions, Gonzaga is up there, but Gonzaga doesn't have football. But Gonzaga is up there to me. But Boise State being number 1, I honestly would say San Diego State, you could say number 2. And then Gonzaga, just because they don't have football, even though this is a national powerhouse on the basketball side, right? You know, Gonzaga every year is going to be a top 10 squad, right? Or at least in the top 25, right? We know Gonzaga is going to give you that every year. Gonzaga has established itself as a basketball powerhouse. In the discussion. But I would say San Diego State second, Gonzaga, and then it's kind of like, okay, when it comes to Fresno, Colorado State, and Utah State, I can say Utah State's at the bottom of that list. And not a shot at Utah State. I say Utah State is at the bottom of that list purely for the simple fact that Utah State wasn't even a part of the original 4 that left the Mountain West to join to join the PAC. It wasn't until like last second moment that Utah State upped and left for the PAC. And I don't know if it was a last minute offer, or if it was more of a situation of Utah State just took their sweet time to make their decision. But Utah State decided to join the PAC literally, I want to say, either the same day or right before the Mountain West schools that were remaining had their memorandum of understanding, their MOU, right? And with that MOU, they were basically like, we see what's happening, we're acknowledging what's happening. You know, I don't want to say it's not a hostile takeover. It's more of like a hostile theft, I guess you can say, it's going on. Right, we see, and we're basically coming to the agreement that these schools here sitting at this table right now that are left, we are staying together. We are not, nobody's leaving, right? So, yeah, once Utah State did what they did, like I said, in this new PAC, Utah State basketball is pretty decent, pretty solid. But I guess you can say Boise State, San Diego State, and then Gonzaga like right there with San Diego State. And then I guess you can say Fresno State, Colorado State, and then Utah State. That's how I would rank those additions. That's how I would view that. Then we have, like I said, what should be Texas State. But like I said, everybody's waiting on when that announcement is going to happen. You still, to this day, to this moment, have these fans that are just like, man, the PAC is going to get Memphis, Tulane, and I'm like, Memphis and Tulane are not joining the Pacific Athletic Conference. If they were going to join the Pacific Athletic Conference, it would have happened already. Like, they're not going anywhere. They're definitely not going anywhere. The more we begin to keep hearing, the more we're hearing about what's going on with the ACC. The more we hear about what's going on with the ACC, the less of a chance in hell you're going to have those schools join the PAC, right? If the ACC is about to not necessarily fall apart, but if the ACC has a chance of losing potentially anywhere from 3 to 4 members, then that's literally opening the door directly for Tulane, USF, Memphis, schools like that to join the ACC. So why would they join the PAC when they definitely can join the ACC and make significantly more money? I actually said to somebody, this is a good thing when you think about it, because the PAC, there's 2 ways to look at this for the PAC. If Memphis, Tulane, and USF join the ACC, if anything, if I am the PAC, I'm going to breathe a slight breath of fresh air. For this reason and this reason only. You want as many other schools joining the ACC. You want as many other schools to join the ACC. You do not want the situation or scenario to happen where, let's say you lose, and here's the thing, nobody has a clue on which schools will be leaving. We keep hearing the same names being thrown around. Florida State, Clemson is kind of in the mix now, potentially leaving. So Florida State, Clemson, well, I guess Clemson has always kind of been one of them, but I guess more of in the sense of potentially going to the Big Ten. Yeah, Florida State, Clemson, you hear Duke get thrown around, North Carolina gets thrown around, and then you have to realize you still have Stanford and Cal. All of this could happen, and Stanford and Cal could be the ones that go to the Big Ten. Why not? You already have 4 former PAC schools. Why not just bring 2 more? Stanford is for sure an AAU school. I'm pretty sure Cal Berkeley is an AAU school. Yeah, it would make slightly more sense to make the Big Ten. Well, see, I guess the reason why you wouldn't add Cal or Stanford is because of kind of where they are right now when it comes to football, basketball, things of that nature. But in saying that, I mean, you do have Andrew Luck, who's taken over things at Stanford, who's trying to get Stanford back on track. Because, I mean, at one point, Stanford was a national powerhouse. Stanford was that team that was in the mix coming out of the PAC, right? Stanford was, like, we're talking about not only one of the strongest academic schools in the country, but then they also have a really, 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 really good football program. Like, that was crazy for a little while. And then things have just kind of gone downhill. So maybe you add Stanford because of Andrew Luck and his presence there, and okay, Stanford's about to get it together, so welcome on in. Because I'm like, you're only strengthening the conference adding a Stanford. Like, we're acting like Stanford isn't damn near synonymous when you talk about schools like Harvard, Yale, like Stanford's up there. Like, let's be serious. Right, we know we have the Ivy League, but I mean, I remember me growing up, I thought Stanford was a part of the Ivy League. I thought Northwestern was a part of the Ivy League. University of Chicago, like, so we have that tier of schools that are basically up there with the Ivy League. You get what I'm saying? Stanford could very much end up in the Big Ten. Like I said, there's ways the PAC should be looking at this, Because if Stanford and Cal stay in the ACC, and it's, let's say they lose 2 schools, or let's say they lose 4 schools. If the ACC loses 4 schools, and those 4 schools happen to be Clemson, Florida State, and let's say maybe Duke in North Carolina, and let's say Duke and North Carolina join the Big Ten. Let's say those are the 2 that join the Big Ten, right? Because like I said, Duke football, but Duke basketball, Duke basketball is Duke basketball. North Carolina football, you got Bill Belichick. He's about to transform that program. How long will it take to get that program up and running to, that standard? I don't know. But you have Bill Belichick running the program. So there's a decently high chance that North Carolina football will be very competitive a lot sooner rather than later. And when you have those types of things going on, and you're the Big Ten, North Carolina football is going to be on point. North Carolina basketball, let's be honest, it's North Carolina basketball. I'm not about to sit here and disrespect North Carolina basketball and act as if this isn't one of the best programs in the history of the sport, right? So Duke and Carolina, both brands are known, hands down. Like, every time a pair of Jordans comes out, there's almost always a Carolina colorway, and they always sell out. So let's not act like North Carolina, the Tar Heels, aren't, So there's a chance that those 2 could go to the Big Ten. And then you could have Florida State and Clemson go to the SEC. Now, my sleeper pick or my sleeper move would be Miami actually going to the SEC. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Who knows? But if you lose those 4 and Stanford and Cal stay exactly where they are, like Stanford and Cal don't go anywhere, because like I said, if Duke and North Carolina goes to the Big Ten, at that point, I don't think at that point the Big Ten has to be at max capacity. Like, you can't still be sitting there like, we're going to add 2 more schools. Like, that's just too many. At that point, like, you just have too many schools. But if it's Duke and North Carolina that go, Clemson and Florida State that go, or Florida State and Miami, or Clemson and Miami, right? Whatever way we want to look at this, if 4 leave, right? If 4 leave, they're going to look to replace them, hands down. You just lost 4 of your biggest brands. Because when I think of the ACC, I mean, it's literally, I think of Duke, I think of North Carolina, I think of Florida State, I think of Clemson, right? Those are the top tier. I mean, you could also add Miami into that mix. And then it's like, you maybe start to think about some of the others, like, okay, we know Syracuse is in there. We know Louisville's in there. Virginia Tech, right? Those schools will still be there. That's fine. That's great. But like I said, you're losing Clemson, who has been one of your strongest football programs over the last decade. Florida State, historically, I mean, Florida State is Florida State. And then, like I said, you got Duke and North Carolina on the basketball side. And North Carolina has had its years. It's very strong years. So, yeah. You lose those 4. If the ACC loses those 4, the PAC better pray. Because now you're for sure not going to get Memphis, Tulane, or those 3 are going instantly, right away. They are being added to the ACC. Memphis, Tulane, and USF. They are now members of the ACC. There's no if or when. It's automatic. Because if you have to pick from who to backfill, I don't know. Or maybe you could maybe see this. This could happen. I'm not going to act like it couldn't. There is potential. So here's maybe a saving grace. There could be some potential because it all comes down to payouts. It all comes down to the money, because that's what it really is at the end of the day. It's a money thing. Like, let's not act like prestige and this, that, the other. Yeah, it all comes down to money. If the ACC loses those four, the one school that has always made the absolute most sense to me to be in the ACC, and it never made sense why they ended up in the Big 12, is West Virginia. West Virginia has multiple rivalries with multiple schools that are in the ACC. And if you look at where West Virginia is, it's odd. Like, it doesn't make sense that West Virginia ended up. But anyways, in the scenario where Memphis, Tulane, USF aren't instantly added to the ACC, and it's a little bit more methodical than, so you're like, well, we're not doing that. West Virginia. Now, why might West Virginia not join? Because I'm pretty sure whatever clause, whatever rules, when it comes to that media rights payout, that may be the reason why West Virginia is going nowhere. The Big 12 media rights deal, I would have to go look it up, and I don't know if I got the time to do that at the exact moment. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But the Big 12 media rights deal, we know that's one that's not that old, right? Because the Big 12 got their media rights deal during the same time that the Pac-12 was trying to get their media rights deal. And because the Pac-12 essentially turned down what they turned down, that's directly what led to the Big 12 media rights deal. Because the Big 12 was like, yeah, we'll take that money. Like that's how that went down. So it all depends on how long the Big 12 media rights deal is, would be what determines if, it's not happening. I just Googled it. It took 3 seconds. Fox Sports Media Group has secured the exclusive cable broadcast rights to the Big 12 Conference in a 13-year deal worth a reported US $1.1 billion over the duration of the contract. So, yeah. Seeing that deal isn't that old, I don't think you're going to see West Virginia going anywhere. Yeah. If that's a 13-year deal worth that much, and the way these deals work is if your school decides to leave, you're essentially going to, it's in a sense, you're going to have to pay. You're going to owe. And there's ways that can be done, because we saw Texas and Oklahoma leave. But Texas and Oklahoma, they were able to make the move they were able to make because the media rights deal that the SEC network has, not SEC network, but that the SEC has. Essentially, they were able to use the media rights money that would have had to come out of Texas and Oklahoma's pocket. They just used the money from that to essentially kind of cover. You get what I'm saying? Like, that's how they did it. That's how it ended up working out. And that's the reason why we were able to see Texas and Oklahoma essentially leave sooner rather than when they were going to. Or actually, no, I'm looking at the wrong thing. So the deal I'm looking at, that's the old deal. Hold on. I don't know why that would be the first thing that popped up. Why? I need the media rights deal. Yeah, because I thought it was ESPN. I'm like, this can't be right. No, it's not Fox. It's ESPN. ESPN and Fox finalized a long-term. Well, no, they still probably aren't going anywhere. So their deal, even then, I want to say was for a solid. ESPN and Fox finalized long-term Big 12 rights extensions, and this was reported on in 2023. but essentially would go through the 2030-31 season, or 2030 to 31 year is when it would essentially expire. Like, so that would be, you know, they'd be trying to renew or re-up. Yeah, that's what, 6 years from now? It's just too many years. And I don't think West Virginia isn't walking around with Texas and Oklahoma type of money, especially not Texas. Like Texas could essentially fundraise, right? Texas, UT Austin could fundraise the money, the million, I mean, even millions of dollars, but they could have potentially pulled it off, right? Texas has that type of power. Oklahoma, they're up there, but they ain't Texas, right? I'm not gonna act like they got that type of money. Oklahoma maybe have been in a better situation to pull that off. Yeah. So because of the media rights deal that the Big 12 has, and when it expires, I guess that eliminates the one thought I had of, right, the ACC could essentially try to pull in maybe a school or two from the Big 12. And I just don't see it happening. Because a lot of money, it would take a lot of money to pull that one off. Like, these schools would essentially have to be like, we're willing to pay those millions of dollars to cover the rest of our term of the contract. You get what I'm saying? To be able to leave and then go to the ACC or whatever. I just don't really see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are willing to do it. But like I said, the thought would be maybe you approach a West Virginia. You know, maybe you pull a West Virginia into the ACC, very natural fit. Why not? The thing is, you also have UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU, who also essentially just joined. I don't even think they'd be able to leave because they're pretty much new members. And like I said, they're in that same exact situation where it's like they would have to cough up millions of dollars to be able to leave, right? You also have the exit fee. So not only do you have to cover the media right payout monies for the rest of the contract, if I remember correctly, then you also have essentially an exit fee you would have to pay. And right, there's just a lot of money. There's a lot of money involved in this. So seeing that seeing that the ACC more than likely would not be able to take anybody from the Big 12, even though there are multiple schools in the Big 12 that geographically, regionally, this, that, the third would fit pretty great in the ACC. Yeah. If you lose 4 schools from the ACC, and I'm going to finish this up quick because I feel like I spent more time on this than I wanted to. If you lose 4 schools from the ACC, the PAC is in trouble. But it all comes down to which schools leave. If Stanford and Cal stay exactly where they are, the PAC is in some trouble. Because what you could then see happen, hear me out, you could then see Memphis and Tulane joining the ACC, most likely USF as well. And then you could still see the ACC be like, well, okay, we got Stanford and Cal over on the West Coast. We want to broaden our footprint a bit more. Now, why is that scary hours for the PAC? Because if I want to extend my footprint, we already got 2 California schools. So what I was originally going to say, I was going to be like, you could maybe see the ACC go after Boise State and San Diego State. That could still be the move. But if their whole thing is like, we want schools, programs, whatever, that are just the most, and that's where it gets rough, because it's like, this actually gets rough. But here's the funny part. I could then see it actually being Oregon State, Washington State, because if you lose the four you lose, like I said, Duke, North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson, you're not just going to replace them with the flat out four. You're going to have to add more than that for the most part. Like, they're probably going to have to backfill with 6, maybe even 8 schools, which sounds crazy, but that might have to be what happens. So you're replacing the 4 that you just lost, and then you're still adding an additional 2 or 4 to try to make up the weight of that loss, because those are huge losses, whether you want to believe it or not. You go and get, like I said, Memphis, Tulane, and USF is most likely also in the ACC. That's just 3. Oregon State, right? And Washington State, you're now at 5. I need at least 1 more. And then that's where it becomes either it's going to be Boise State or San Diego State. There's a strong chance it could end up being San Diego State. Because you got to remember, for the past however many years, it's always been San Diego State that's been getting considered to join this conference, join that conference. Boise State, at the end of the day, Boise State is going to forever and always just kind of be hurt. I think by the simple fact that they are Boise State. Like, they're in Idaho. You don't have this super strong viewership base, right? Technically, nationally, you get viewership like they do. Don't get me wrong. They give you, like, if it's a Boise State versus whoever game on, people are going to watch it. But that is definitely true when it's more of, okay, we're talking about a ranked Boise State. We're talking about a highly performing Boise State. If this ain't that Boise State, if this is a 6-6 Boise State, people aren't going to be as excited to watch that team. Now, when it's a Boise State that almost beats Oregon, okay, our attention is now on Boise State. When it's a Boise State that beats the hell out of, who's beating power conference schools, okay, our eyes are on that Boise State game. We're going to watch at a national level. But we all know those media markets, people are like, media markets don't matter, yada, yada, yada. In Boise State's case, I do feel like it still matters a bit. I do think it still matters a bit. I think it still matters a bit. When Boise State is ranked and beating people, and you have Ashton Genty and this, that, the other, yes, eyes are on Boise State. You can get that national viewership. It's more than extremely smart to put Boise State versus UNLV on primetime Fox. Like, yeah, people are going to watch that, especially with that later time slot. They're going to watch that. But if Boise State ain't performing, the numbers aren't going to be super ridiculous. And then on top of that, it's like, I don't know what Boise State attendance looks like for football. Like, I don't know. Like, is their stadium filled, packed to the, like, is every seat filled? Are we talking about that? Or is it like, even for a Boise State squad, they're still not necessarily hitting those numbers? I'd assume that they are. I'd assume that they are. Like, I'd be kind of shocked if they weren't. I'm pretty sure they're getting the attendance. But yeah. You got to think. It has been San Diego State for years now that the school overall, and due to location, That's the other huge factor. The school overall, and due to location, San Diego State is the more power conference ready school. And that sounds crazy, but it's the truth. San Diego State has more going for it than Boise State does. So if you see 4 schools leave the ACC, you very much could see Tulane, Memphis, Southern Florida, San Diego State, Oregon State, and Washington State all get absorbed into the ACC. Now, here's even scarier. Here's what's even scarier. And I got to look this up real quick. I just do the math on this because remember, you hear a lot of people say, too many mouths to feed, too many mouths to feed. You hear that a lot. And I'm just like, in today's world with the payouts that are happening with these huge conferences, that too many mouths to feed part don't matter. When, for some odd reason, these conferences are getting bajillions of dollars thrown at them. Why is this thing not popping up? Come on. I need college football. Why am I getting everything but college football? I know it's not college football season right now, but still. I'm trying to find, why is it, okay, ESPN. This is like the worst optimized site I've ever, because I've never seen it not have college football. I get it. It's not like, okay, there we go. NCAA football. There we go. And like, that was way too difficult to get to. If I'm looking at the ACC, we're talking about purely for football, because like we know on the basketball side, we know Notre Dame is in the ACC when it comes to basketball, right? But if I'm purely just looking at for football, right? Remember, they have Stanford, Cal, and then SMU's also in the ACC. The ACC is currently sitting at, let me see, let me do some math. I got to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. They're sitting at 17, which is an odd number. Yeah, it's already weird that they're sitting at 17. So, I mean, I guess it works. They had no issue with it, so it works out. All right, doing simple mental math. 17 minus 4, what does that give you? That gives you 13. They go down to a 13-team conference when you have the Big Ten, who, like I just said, if the Big Ten adds 2 more schools, I think that puts them at 20. So, yeah, like, you can't have these other conferences with a bajillion schools. Like, it's literally monopolizing. Like, conferences are monopolizing right now, right? They're taking as many brand names as they possibly can get, right? Like, let me make sure. Big Ten, I'm pretty sure, is at 18, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, yeah, 18. Like I said, they add 2 more, they're at a flat 20. Right, they're at a flat 20 if they add 2 more. Big Ten, SEC, I think they're at 18 as well. Maybe not. Let me see. Let me triple check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They're at 16. So, you have a 16-team SEC. You got a potentially 20-team Big Ten. ACC's at 17 as of right now, and then you still have the Big 12 that's at what? 1, 2, 3. Big 12's at 16. So it seems like that minimum number is 16. You don't want to be the power conference that does not meet the minimum standard requirement, right? You kind of have to build. You're forced to build. And they're not going to, like I said, if you lose Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Duke, remember, when Texas and Oklahoma left, they lost 2 and added 4. It wasn't as simple as, oh, well, we're losing Texas and Oklahoma and we're just going to add 2. No, they lost 2 and they added 4. It just so happened that you then had Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and I feel like I'm missing somebody. Was it just those 3? It just so happened that those 3 were also available, right? Those 3 were also available. It just so happened to work out. ACC, because the ACC seems like they're in trouble, then that definitely means the PAC should be a little scared. Because the wildest part is that they've done what they've done, and there's a very solid chance that all of that could basically be dismantled within no time. And I actually, the more I think about it, I think that's also a huge reason why the PAC is moving in slow motion. Because like I said, if you see these ACC schools move, they lose 4, they go down to 13. You would think it's as simple, oh, well, but no. You cannot sit, nobody can sit here with a straight face and be like, well, we lost Florida State, Clemson, Duke, and North Carolina, and we replaced them with Memphis, Tulane, and USF. No, you're going to need more than that to fill that void. And if I'm the ACC, Memphis, Tulane, especially Tulane, because Tulane is right there, right. We're talking about right next to Texas. So that helps SMU a little bit, right? They kind of have a travel partner, I guess you could say. Memphis, Tennessee, not that far from Texas as well, but Tennessee just centrally located. It works, right? Memphis works. Tulane works. USF, okay. Instead of us now just only having one Florida team, we at least do want to have another Florida team, right? So we bring in USF. The next obvious thing would be, right, it's not going to be, right, they can't attack the Big 12 because there's a lot of money. There's just too much money that would have to be coughed up to be able to poach a Big 12 school. It was just too much money involved there. So that's kind of not an option. You got the PAC. Yeah. Oh, I'm missing one team. And no, even then, yeah. Even then, the ACC could sit there and be like, okay, we lost 4. Let's replace those 4 plus 2. So what you actually end up with is this. And this is what, and you got to understand, once again, for the PAC, there's a reason why UConn did not come and join y'all. UConn knows what they're waiting for. If the ACC loses their 4 schools, they're adding Memphis, Tulane, USF, and UConn. And then they will still add another 2. You want to know who those 2 will probably end up being? And this is the wildest part. There is a strong chance that those 2 could end up being Oregon State and Washington State. Why? Because they are the 2 that are, you could kind of say that they are the most power conference ready because they spent the last century in a power conference, right? They've been in a power conference, right? They got the stadium, you got the alumni base, you got the, right? You have all of those things. Those things, they're already there when you get Oregon State and Washington State. The only thing you're not getting is consistent performance in football. Like, that's the one thing you're not getting is consistent performing football programs. Basketball, I believe Washington State has a decent basketball squad, but in Oregon State, I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing them up. Maybe Oregon State had a decent basketball team. I know Oregon State baseball, I believe, is decent. I don't know what Oregon State is really good at, right? I'm not even trying to send shots at Oregon State, but I really don't know. But Oregon State and Washington State can be gone. 17, 18, 19. At that point, you're probably just like, just give us one more. We'll take one more school. And then that's when it becomes either it's going to be San Diego State or Boise State. And it could be San Diego State. It very much could be San Diego State. Very much could be San Diego State. Or it could be Boise State. I don't know. But I got a feeling it'll be San Diego State. So just imagine the PAC's worst nightmare happens. And all of this comes down to, like, what really makes this happen is Cal and Stanford not leaving the ACC, which, like I said, there hasn't been much traction about Cal or Stanford leaving the ACC. You've only been hearing Duke, North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State. You have not heard anything about Cal or Stanford. SMU has no reason to leave, right? SMU's already in the situation SMU's in, but SMU's pretty much committed, right? SMU just had a great season in the ACC. SMU just made the shit. No, they didn't make the college football playoff. Wait, yes, they did. Wait, no, they didn't. Oh, I can't remember. It's all a blur at this point. But, yeah, SMU's not going anywhere. Even though SMU would seem like the most common sense fit in the Big 12, that's just not how things went. So, SMU is good. SMU's good. SMU's solid. They're fine. SMU's happy. Right? I don't see SMU having an issue with anything. So they ain't going nowhere. But you're gonna want to, like I said, you're gonna want to kind of bridge the gap a little bit. Like, you don't just want SMU out there on the island, because that's kind of what they are right now. That's why Tulane comes in. Memphis. Tulane, Memphis, USF, UConn, Oregon State, Washington State, and then potentially San Diego State. They lost 4. They added 7. They're at 20. Right? Is it going to spread the money a little thin? I guess whatever. But those schools you're bringing in, for instance, all these schools, Oregon State, Washington State, Memphis, Tulane, UConn, San Diego, all 7 of those schools don't even have to get necessarily a full payout. You can literally take the money that would have been going to North Carolina, Duke, Florida State, and Clemson, take it, add it together, divide it by 7, and it will still be a huge payout to those 7 schools who would be joining. So it works regardless. That's just how it is. Works regardless. All right, just have to check real quick. No, SMU did make the college football playoff. Yeah, SMU's 100% committed. Like, they have no reason to leave the ACC. They already have their money situation because when they left the American Athletic Conference, when they left, it was very last minute, right? When Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF were leaving the AAC to join the Big 12, right? They followed the protocols with that, right? Where it's typically like, you let them know at a certain amount of time and this, that, the other, right? And those three, I believe they still owed some money, but I think because they did it more than the way you're supposed to do things, right? It wasn't as hard of a hit. Versus SMU, like when SMU went and joined the ACC, it was like, we're joining the ACC. Like, it was like me waking up tomorrow and being like, NIU is joining the ACC. Technically, based on the Mountain West package agreement, technically we could join the ACC penalty free, which would be great. But you get where I'm going with this, right? They just kind of made the decision to, well, we're joining, and financially that kind of put them in a situation, but in the long run it will pay off for SMU. Plus, like I said, SMU has been raising money and have pledges and contributions and this, that, the other. So you got to keep in mind, Texas football is a whole total different thing. Plus, SMU's in Dallas. So SMU's fine. You still want to, like I said, you still want to give them some schools. Yeah, the PAC is in trouble. Now, in the span of this video, I came into this video, this conversation was supposed to be about the transfer portal and NIL and Gino Auriemma and what he said about it, and we need to regulate. That's what this video was supposed to be about. Now like I said, we're back with some college football, and it is March 30th, and like I said, not SMU, but the PAC was supposed to make some announcements late March, and not a single thing has been announced. And it has now led to this domino effect of, is everything in complete standstill because the PAC is trying to see if they're even going to be the PAC? I think that's what this is. I think what you are really seeing is, I think they kind of see some writing on the wall, and they realize that there's a decent chance that everything they basically kind of did might be blowing up. Because you have two conferences that are going to be affected and impacted. You're going to have the AAC, which I believe they've been bracing for already, right? And you have to realize the job of a conference commissioner versus the difference between an athletic director, or, a lot of times, athletic director positions at universities are like, those are VP positions, right? If you're an athletic director, you are an associate vice president most of the time at the university you're at. You have to realize, like, the AD, the decisions they make are in the best interest of their university. The commissioner for the conference is not an athletic, like, they're not the AD's boss. What the commissioner is doing is, yes, they're trying to protect the conference, but at the end of the day, the commissioners also understand that the best interest of those schools, they're going to make the best decision for their school, right? All they can do is be like, you have a home here, whatever help you need, this, that, the other. If you want to sit down, right, I can organize this and that's literally what the AAC commissioner did. You had the schools that were contacted by the PAC, which was UTSA, Tulane, Memphis, and USF. Instead of them all being on their own little island and silo, and they all came together, which is something I guess you don't see often, but all four came together and did some comparing and contrasting. And they were like, well, what was in yours? What was in your offer? What was in your offer? And clearly all 4 of them came to the consensus that were like, yeah, nah, this ain't worth it. Let's be realistic. It's not worth it. We don't know what their media rights deal is going to be, so we don't know if that pay. That's one of the biggest things. If the PAC already had a media rights deal lined up and they knew, and people knew exact numbers. If the PAC was offered because right now they have 7 members, right? If the PAC was offered $1 billion, I don't even know if billion's enough, but let's do this back. Let's do this the other way. If the PAC, let's make it more. Trying to come up with a number that makes sense. Because they're sitting at 8 schools right now, but 7 for football. They tried to add at least, because I don't know if they're just trying to get to 9. Who knows if they're trying to get to 12? Who knows if they're just trying to get to 10? But if they would have added Memphis and Tulane, that would have put them at 9. Right? If you add Texas State, they're at 10. So let's say, but then we have 11 schools because you have Gonzaga as well. And then let's say they also, because another one that apparently that they're potentially going to add is St. Mary's. So yeah, they'll be the Pac-12, but they'll only be 10 for football. But they're at 12. And let's say even though Gonzaga and St. Mary's are full members non-football, let's say that they are still getting a full cut, right? They have the value where they're like, we not joining if we don't get a full cut. So we're at 12. If I knew, or if the PAC knew that their deal was going to be, let's say, if they knew they had, just about $1 billion deal. If they knew they had $1 billion media rights deal over the next 6 years, right? You can do the math. If they were like, we have a $1 billion 6-year deal lined up. Contingent though, right? Because if you say contingent, we have $1 billion 6-year deal contingent on you all joining, right? It's in paper, it's in writing, this, that, the other, but it definitely says that these are the schools that also have to be joining. Let's say now instead of Texas State at that point, let's say it's UTSA. So it's Tulane, Memphis, UTSA. Yeah, Tulane, Memphis, and UTSA. They're like, we want Texas, we want Tulane, we want a Texas school, Tulane and Memphis. And they're like, yeah, we got $1 billion 6-year deal. So all you really do is take $1 billion and divide it by 6. And then, like I said, we got 12 schools because they're like, well, we got Gonzaga and St. Mary's as well. So we're really at 12. Everybody's a full member. There's no partial members. Everybody's at full membership, right? That's 166.6 million, right? We're going to take that number divided by another 6. No, divide that number by 12. What am I talking about? And your payout is $13.8 million a year. If those schools had known that they're about to get a $13.8 million payout, okay, we can now justify joining the PAC. Because there has been absolutely no number. There was no number at all. There's no way to make that decision. There's just no way to make it, right? If you got a $2 billion deal over the span of 6 years, divided by, right, these 12 schools, that's power conference money. That's $27.7 million payout per school. That's power conference money. You all have a power conference. There's no way Memphis, Tulane, or anybody's turning that down. $27 million a year. That's more than the Big 12 schools get. So that's a huge difference. Huge difference. But there's no numbers. There's no numbers. And that's the reason why these schools haven't joined. I'm really truly starting to sit here and be like, yo, because you got to keep in mind, and as we've heard, the number one interest of the Pacific Athletic Conference, which is technically Oregon State and Washington State. Keep that in mind. The Pacific Athletic Conference is Oregon State and Washington State. Boise, Colorado State, Fresno State, Utah State, San Diego, they are not members 100% officially just yet. Not until summer 2026. So the interest of the conference and who it truly serves right now is Oregon State and Washington State. When that's the factoring, that's the thing that you're thinking about, and you have what's going on where it's like, let's look at our literally, I guess you can say, the opposite counterpart to the PAC, which is the ACC. If they're over there and there's a chance that 4 of those schools could be leaving and joining the Big Ten and the SEC, I mean, if the SEC is like, nah, we want to get to 20. We don't want to sit at. If the SEC is like, we want 20 schools, yeah, it's a ripple effect automatically down. No matter how it goes, it is a huge domino effect. Because the more schools that get pulled away, the power conferences are going to come pulling. And then once the power conferences get who they want, now the group of the middle tier schools, well, now they're going to pull from the next group. And then now it's going to, and then eventually you end up reaching into the FCS trying to backfill. And it's just a never-ending cycle. It's literally a never-ending cycle. The only 2 conferences who could potentially be like, we want you, and those schools come, regardless of contractual this, contractual that, are the Big Ten and the SEC. If the Big Ten is like, Kansas, come join, we'll take Kansas, and we want Cincinnati, we want Iowa State, we want... It's almost like it does not matter, right? It literally does not matter what that Big 12 contract says. In the long run, you all will more than likely make more money now joining the Big 10. You just got to sacrifice a couple of years, a few years. But on the back end, joining the Big 10 will clearly be a lot more beneficial. So they're going to make that move. Same thing if the SEC comes and taps. They're like, okay, we want Arizona State and TCU or something. They're gone. They're joining the SEC. They're joining the SEC. they're gone. They will take the brunt of whatever force, and they'll thug it out, and they're going to join the SEC. But like I said, we're just purely pulling from the ACC. We're not really worrying too much about the Big 12 getting cannibalized. We're just looking at the ACC situation right now. And like I said, in that ACC situation, if you see 4 of those schools leave and those schools involved are not Stanford or Cal, that spells very big trouble for the PAC. And I think that's what's about to happen. God forbid the SEC is like, we want to get to 20. You could then see even more schools gone. And the ACC is definitely going to be in trouble. And if the ACC is in trouble, the PAC, you're toast. because the SEC is not going to add any schools from the West Coast. They're not adding Stanford or Cal. They don't want Stanford or Cal. The PAC better pray. The PAC needs to pray that if the SEC targets the ACC and they take Florida State, Clemson, and let's say they end up with North Carolina and Duke, let's say that's who they end up taking, and the Big Ten is like, okay, Stanford and Cal. PAC, you're lucky. You're lucky in the sense that nobody's going to be taking any of your schools. But that also means you're not going to be getting any of the schools that you want. See how that plays out? UConn, USF, Memphis, and Tulane are joining the ACC. And that might be the only four. Unless the ACC starts to scan around the room and then they're like, well, we can't take anybody from the SEC. We can't take anybody from the Big Ten. We want to go after West Virginia and maybe Cincinnati or maybe UCF or, right? We want to go after those schools, but do we have the juice to pull them from the Big 12? Don't know, right? Like I said, the Big 12 has a nice contract. Does the money in the ACC equate to leaving the Big 12? We know the money in the SEC and the Big 10 may be able to pry some of those schools loose, but does the money in the ACC equate to prying any of those schools loose? And that's where things, right? If the answer is yes, now the Big 12 is going to be affected. And then if that's the case, guess who is now in trouble once again? The PAC. Because guess what? The Big 12 probably is willing to dip into San Diego State, Boise State. The Big 12 might just be like, Oregon State, Washington State, come on. They might. It could happen. But it all depends. It all depends. This is an all bad situation for the PAC. And I'm starting to really think that's the reason why we aren't hearing much. The more I just sat here, y'all just seen the cogs in my brain all work all at the same time. It all just all made sense. It was like, yo, if I'm the PAC, do I even, I have to add somebody, I got to do something, but at the same time, could there be some things getting ready to happen that end up changing everything? And the answer is yes. The answer is very much yes. All of this starts with, if I'm the PAC, I'm like, yo, I need Stanford and Cal gone. I need them in the Big Ten. I need them in the Big Ten. I need them in the Big Ten. Nowhere else. Yeah, this is all bad. This is all bad for the PAC. Stanford, Cal needs to go to the Big Ten, and even if they do, there's no promise that the PAC won't get cannibalized. And now what this could mean, and I'm going to finish this up real quick because I'm already over an hour. What could this mean for NIU? So, we just saw the movement that happened. We just saw everything that's going on. Here's what we would want to hope a bit. I guess you could say we want some hope for certain things going down. If all of this plays out where the ACC loses 4 schools, maybe not 6, but 4. And let's say North Carolina, Duke go to the Big Ten, Florida State and Clemson go to the SEC. So now the backfill begins to happen. That backfill happens. UConn, USF, Memphis, Tulane, and Oregon State, Washington State join. Yeah, Oregon State and Washington State join the ACC. There's always the chance that the ACC could be like, let's just make it an even 20, right? Instead of 19, let's just make it 20. And, you know, you could potentially see either San Diego State or Boise State. And in this scenario, I think San Diego State is the one that gets the tap, because San Diego State over the years now has already been the school that has been targeted for power conference expansion, realignment, all that fun stuff. So I think San Diego State gets the nod instead of Boise State. What does that situation create? You now have 4 former Mountain West schools just sitting here, and they're just like, WTF. I guess technically, like, if all this stuff happened before 2026, like, let's say this all went down in, let's say this all went down this year, which could happen. Like, it very much could happen. Let's say this all went down this year. Like, shit got crazy real quick. If it got that crazy, yeah. And in this scenario, Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, and Fresno State are just kind of sitting there floating in the water looking stupid. They're coming back to the Mountain West. Like, the Mountain, well, technically, they're still Mountain West members. That's the wildest part. They are still members of the Mountain West. Essentially, what would happen is the PAC would dissolve. Because if Oregon State and Washington State get folded into the ACC, the PAC is gone. The PAC is gone. Those are officially the only 2 members. Those are the 2 members. I do not think the conference then transfers over to Boise State, and they're not official until 2026. So I think the PAC and the Oregon State and Washington State are not in a position to turn down the ACC. They need the money. They need that consistent check coming in. And if that consistent check is 20 million plus, and then they'll be there with Cal, they'll be there with Stanford, and like I said, they also pulled in San Diego State. So you have 5 West Coast schools. You got 5 West Coast schools. Yeah, sadly, the PAC is gone. All of the history and the Conference of Champion, like, that's sad. That out of all the conferences that ended up biting the dust, it was the PAC. But it all came down to essentially USC and UCLA, and it wasn't even just them. It was also the fact that they kind of self-sabotaged themselves. They had deals that they could have taken. They had schools that they could have added SMU and San Diego State and then built and continued on, and they didn't. So the PAC kind of self-sabotaged. They kind of self-sabotaged, and they ended up in a position they're in. Like I said, what does that mean for NIU? You now have Gonzaga. Gonzaga is just sitting there. And I think if I'm the Mountain West, I'm instantly pulling, I'm like, Gonzaga, join the Mountain West, right? Join the Mountain West. Technically, Boise, Colorado, those schools are still there. And they're not, those 4 are not in a position to just make their own conference. They're not necessarily in a position to be like, well, we're going to go independent, because that's kind of goofy. I think they'll have some reconciling they need to do. I think that's a for sure. I think some things will need to be reconciled. But they, right, maybe you see a Boise State beg, like, Big 12, please take us. You know, maybe Fresno State could potentially get into the Big 12. And even if that's the case, you now still have a situation where, well, look, Colorado State and Utah State are sitting here. Gonzaga is still like, yo, what WTF is going on? I would assume maybe Gonzaga goes back to the West Coast Conference. But let's say, like I said, just in a situation scenario where Boise State, Fresno State, Utah State, and Colorado State are just back in the Mountain West, because they technically haven't left the Mountain West, I'm pushing, and I'm like, yo, I need to get Gonzaga into the Mountain West. And then also follow up on St. Mary's into the Mountain West. Now the Mountain West is definitely a lot stronger of a conference in the sense that, okay, yes, you lost. Essentially, it would be like the Mountain West lost San Diego State, but they've added UTEP, they've added NIU for football. Essentially, I would even start to kind of look at it a little bit and be like, okay, if I'm bringing those four back and I'm adding Gonzaga and I'm adding St. Mary's, do I now consider, because if all of these dominoes started to fall and media rights deals and yada, 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 and now you have to reevaluate the Mountain West, and you're now like I said, we're at 9, but if those 4 come back, you're at 13. You're at 13, and then you're also adding in Gonzaga and potentially St. Mary's for basketball. So Gonzaga, St. Mary's, UC Davis, and Grand Canyon University are your basketball additions. If I'm the Mountain West, I'm like, okay, do I make it a flat 14? And do I go after Toledo? Do I add Texas State? Right? That's what the Mountain West would now be doing, because it's like, are you going to get a media rights deal that's in that 20? No, you're not. It's not going to happen. But now you're potentially in a situation where it's like, well, we got Boise State back. We got schools coming back, and we're adding Gonzaga. We're adding St. Mary's. Right? We got the Central Time Zone. At that point, I'm like, yo, it either comes down to this. Either you add Texas State to the Mountain West, or you add Toledo. If you add Toledo, you're adding that Eastern Standard Time, like you're adding the Eastern Time Zone, right? You got Central Time, Eastern Time, Mountain, and Pacific. If you add Toledo, Mountain West would be the only conference that has 5 time zones, which would be insane to think about. Like, that's kind of crazy. Mountain West will always have football going on, essentially, when you think about it. I would have to think about that one. I would have to consider that one. Or you add Texas State and make your Texas presence 2 schools instead of 1. But like I said, you could also still reapproach Toledo, because in my mind, I'm like, the Mountain West would be a stronger conference. It is stronger with having Boise State. It's stronger with having Gonzaga. It's a stronger conference. So you have to begin looking at what could the media rights payout be for that version of the Mountain West, where the PAC is completely just gone. Oregon State, Washington State, and San Diego State are now in the ACC. Yeah, we know it's not going to be, oh, here's a $20 million. That would be insane if the Mountain West all of a sudden is jumping up to a $20 million payout. I don't see that. But could the Mountain West finagle their way into every full member is getting 13 mil, 15 mil, something like that? Now, if I'm NIU now, that money, that number is looking real different. So this is how NIU could be impacted. We're in the Mountain West for football, which I believe gets a decent size cut. But could we now join for all sports? And I think you come back to the table, and I think if things went down the way they went down in general, I think that would be the first one of the first convos that happens anyways. Like, well, we got Boise State, things have happened. I'm probably now going to NIU, and I'm like, well, NIU, or I'm looking at things more from the sense of, because of these certain dominoes that fell in Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, and Fresno State, along with us adding Gonzaga, we're also adding St. Mary's. We're speaking to our media rights partners, this, that, the other. The payout on the table is now $13 million, $15 million per school per year. To the Mountain West Conference, every full member is getting that much money. I would think Commissioner Navarez is speaking to NIU, and it's potentially like circumstances have changed in a very positive way, right? Very good for us, right? Very good for the Mountain West and you as well. Would you like to join as a full member? I would think that maybe potentially that opportunity is on the table because, like I said, if our biggest thing is travel and if we're trying to build, we're trying to do things, right? We have funding that we never had before that would be coming into NIU, right? We could get a coach, we could get some NIL monies, we can actually make some things happen. But I think, like I said, this is a wild outcome, but it's not impossible for this outcome to happen. This outcome has a higher likelihood of happening than NIU ever joining the Big 12 or joining the ACC. And it's a realistic statement. There's a higher chance that everything I said could happen going down. You could see it go down exactly like that. You could see 4 leave the PAC. The PAC backfills with UConn, Memphis, Tulane, USF, Oregon State, Washington State, and San Diego State, which then puts the PAC in a situation where I guess it would dissolve. There is no more PAC, which then leads to the situation where Boise State, Colorado State, Utah State, Fresno State are just now still with the Mountain West. And then Gonzaga, which I like, in my eyes, I'm like Gonzaga. Like, if I'm the Mountain West now, I'm instantly like Gonzaga. Would you like to join? Would you like to join the Mountain West along with St. Mary's? Would you like to join the Mountain West as full members? You all get a full cut as well. And then, like I said, this leads to the situation because NIU at that point would be the only football only member. I might be looking at NIU and I'm like, we get it. You just did what you right. All of this is contingent once again on media rights deal, but your media rights deal has been strengthened by getting Boise State back, getting Fresno back, getting Colorado State back, getting Utah State back. They're officially still in the fold, in the mix. We're fixing the relationship there. But then you also get Gonzaga, right? You go and add Gonzaga, you go and add St. Mary's. So now you have a relatively pretty dang strong basketball conference. I would think that version of the Mountain West could get a very solid media rights deal. And if that is the case, NIU could potentially join as a full member. It sounds crazy. Sounds crazy as all hell. But why not? Why not? And then that's when you begin to work with your media rights partner and you're like, okay, would it be beneficial to add Toledo to get that Eastern time slot? Do we add Texas State to add another Texas school in the mix? If they're like, nah, stick at 13 stick at the 13 schools you got. Well, we'd have more than 13, but stick to the 13 you have for football. No need to expand further east. Then it is what it is. But if that version of the Mountain West, that includes Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Boise, and all of them, is leading to a $13 million payout, potentially a $15 million payout, something like that, I see no reason NIU isn't like, yo, let's potentially let's be all in. Let's be all in. And you go from there. That would be a game changer. That would be a game changer. Everything changes. And we could see that happen. I truly believe that I think people are thinking about this. I think, the commissioners, athletic directors, I think that they're really truly sitting there. They're like, this could be what happens because all of this is a domino effect and it's all very realistic. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, I want to hear your thoughts about this. Cause like I said, we could very much see this shakeup happen. And my thoughts from the get-go would be, how would the PAC be impacted? And I see an impact. It all comes down to, does the SEC just want 2 schools? Do they want 4 schools? Who are the schools they want? The Big Ten, it seems like they could potentially be angling, or at least the speculation is, they want to get to 20. So who are the 2 they bring in? Is it Duke and North Carolina? Is it Stanford and Cal? Who is it? Regardless, no matter how it goes, the ACC will be affected and impacted. So, yeah, definitely I want to hear what y'all thoughts are. How do y'all think this will all play out? Peace.